Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather on this 27th day of July 2020, Monday. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, we've got rainfall amounts for the North Slope and western Arctic coast there. The first one there at AKwx, I believe that's pronounced. That's over on the eastern North Slope, about halfway between, say, the Brooks Range and the Arctic coast there, give or take. But they picked up about 1.43 inches, so nearly an inch and a half of precipitation there in the last 24 hours. And then off to the west, Wainwright picked up 1.37 inches in the same 24-hour period. And then Lookout Ridge, which is down toward the western Brooks Range of the Long Mountains, they picked up about an inch of precipitation, and Point Lay had 2/3 of an inch. So forecast was right on the button that was put out Saturday for the North Slope, picking up anywhere from 1/2 to 1.5 inches of rain across in a 24-hour period there. Also pretty gusty winds, as high as 45 to in some cases 55 miles an hour, like at Point Lay, or I'm sorry, Cape Lisburne had gusts to 55 miles an hour. Next up here is a fire danger chart, and some high fire dangers areas have emerged again along the Yukon River there and the Porcupine River. Some high fire danger, high to very high fire danger, and also there, say from Buckland or Deering over toward Buckland and in toward the western Kobuk Valley. That mostly due to the winds. They haven't picked up really much of any precipitation there. It's all fallen to the north or to the southeast. And so that's mostly due to windy conditions and then the lack of rainfall. And then also on the Yukon Delta into high to very high fire danger period now zone there along the lower Yukon River. And so that's probably going to improve there for the upper Yukon Valley with some rain moving through, as well as the area on the Seward Peninsula. And the next chart here is showing the lightning strikes as of about 3 o'clock this afternoon. And kind of unusual, I see them out over the southeastern Chukchi Sea there, most of them occurring out over the water, and some strikes there on the northern Seward Peninsula and just south of Kotzebue and toward the Selawik Valley area there. An isolated strike up over the western North Slope, and also farther just to the east there, and then down over the Alaska Range. It looks like toward southwest of Denali Park there, but just one strike. So kind of unusual. Most of the strikes today occurring out over the Chukchi Sea as opposed to over the eastern interior or the interior. Otherwise, there's no watches, warnings, advisories out anywhere for the state for the next 24 hours or so, probably longer. And satellite imagery showing a lot of clearing taking place over the Gulf of Alaska, south central Alaska, and also up over the Kuskokwim and Yukon River Valley areas, lower Yukon River Valley, as well as Kodiak Island starting to break out, Bristol Bay. And from Kuskokwim Bay, it looks like some breaks almost tried to get out to the Pribilofs, and a few breaks, sun breaks there, it looks like just east of Atka Island. Otherwise, showers ending today, or trying to end over the southeast coast. They're pretty scattered this afternoon, but are going to linger over the southern southeast coast due to upper trough that's going to linger there as well for the next at least 24 hours. Otherwise, the front dropping into the North Slope area, you can see there westerly flow behind it, got strong winds. Most of the push is off to the east with very little southward push at all to that feature, but pretty gusty winds extended all the way down to Scammon Bay on the Yukon Delta coast, with both Savunga and Scammon Bay reporting gusts of 45 miles an hour. And Cape Lisburne, as I mentioned, had peak wind about 55 miles an hour. That was at 4:50. That was about 5 a.m. this morning. The last 50+ mile per hour wind gusts. They've since dropped off considerably and become northwest with light winds this afternoon. And the windiest conditions now pushing off to the east. Otherwise, on the chart here, you can see the area of rainfall this afternoon or during the day today across the eastern Arctic coast, extending back into the thunderstorms there, as we saw over toward the Seward Peninsula and out over the southeastern Chukchi Sea pretty much, it was a dry day for St. Lawrence Island, but they had the windy conditions there. And again, some sun breaking out, high pressure over the southeastern Bering Sea into Bristol Bay, starting to ridge up, a little more impressive aloft. That's slowly shifting eastward. And so each day, less clouds and more sunshine and warmer temperatures. Already today's temperatures rising into the lower to mid 70s across south central Alaska, and even in the Kuskokwim Valley there, just west of Sleep, Mute, Stony River, had 75 degrees for the warm spot in the state today. Otherwise, Big Lake and Butte both had 73. And lower 70s also showing up over the Kenai Peninsula, 70 degrees at Ninilchik. And showers persisting over the Copper River Basin up into the eastern interior areas, all the way up toward Old Crow from Eagle. And showers decreasing, a couple of troughs, weak troughs sliding southeastward there. Not much in the way of precipitation. I think Juneau had 1/10 of an inch in the last 12 hours. And that was earlier on. It's pretty much stopped just about everywhere there. But there'll still be a chance of showers through tonight with a persistent upper-level trough and the reflection at the surface there over the southern panhandle. But amounts will be light, and look for dry conditions to the north. Low clouds and fog, high pressure, light winds over much of the Gulf of Alaska. That could push into Kodiak Island during the night tonight, but that wind flow trying to become northwesterly with a high pressure to the west of you there. But definitely west-southwest breezes, still pretty gusty, 25, maybe 30 miles an hour. A few higher gusts there from northern Bering Sea. And now the windiest conditions will be over the central interior area, especially at higher elevations. And that front really washing out there over the Seward Peninsula. The rain band not so impressive as it was, but still an area of rain from the Kobuk-Koyukuk Valley up across the central Brooks Range, eastern north slope to the eastern Arctic coast. And just some drizzle showing up on the western coastline there with lots of IFR flying conditions right on down across all of the Bering Sea. Next front spreading rain into Adak and Atka. But high pressure, light winds, dry conditions for the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. And for tomorrow, that wind flow should become enough northwesterly or west-northwest to clear it out for Kodiak tomorrow, maybe high near 70. Otherwise, Bristol Bay, Bering Sea, low clouds and fog in the front, stalling out up over the interior there. That's really weakening now. 1,004 millibar low now, really just a band of areas of light rain and showers, and winds much lighter, in fact, turning kind of east or east-northeasterly on the eastern Arctic coast there, and really light now on the west side into the Chukchi Sea. And a weak trough there, or that front washes out into a trough. Couple of areas of light precipitation, rain, drizzle, and fog for the Adak-Atka area, trying to push into Nikolsky and then back over the western Aleutians. And still upper-level trough keeping a chance of showers in over the southern southeast coast with partly sunny skies to the north. And tomorrow looks set highs in the 70s again, south central Alaska, Kenai Peninsula, and Copper River Basin. Less showers, warmer temperatures. Still a chance of showers over the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country. And for Wednesday, that ends. Looks like Tanana Valley will be back into the 75 to 80 degree range temperatures, even up into the upper Yukon Valley. Partly to mostly sunny skies. Another front does drop more rain and a little bit of an increase in the winds to the Arctic coast and to a lesser extent the North Slope, but it won't be nearly as strong as the one that affected the area over the last 24 hours. And the whole system, high pressure aloft, shifting over the interior, so 75 to 80 also for the Kenai Peninsula for highs, and south central Alaska. Still a few shower chances on the southeast coast, and with everything shifting eastward, it looks like rain will make landfall possibly by late afternoon Wednesday on the southwest coast. Wet conditions for the Alaska Peninsula on Wednesday with kind of unsettled conditions northward to the Bering Strait. Lows for tonight, upper 40s to lower 50s southeast coast and mid to upper 50s central and northeast interior. Otherwise 30s for the North Slope and Arctic coast and 40s to lower 50s most everywhere else. Highs tomorrow, 70s. Easily 70s, Kenai Peninsula, Mananuska-Susitna Valley, warmer in the Copper River Basin, lower to mid-70s, and about the same in the Panhandle, persistent trough there, keeping it cooler, upper 50s to lower 60s, and highs in the upper 30s there for the central Arctic coast, otherwise the North Slope, upper 40s to lower 50s, and you can see 70-degree weather showing up all the way down to about Kodiak into Bristol Bay and the Kuskokwim Valley, cooling back to the mid-50s along the southwest coast and lower to mid-50s for the Aleutians. And for the lows on Wednesday morning, mid-30s, not much of a drop from your highs there for the Arctic coast. North Slope, upper 30s to mid-40s and mid-50s over the central northeast interior, as well as south central Alaska. And moving on to highs, 75 to 80 south central Alaska, maybe 77 Gulkana, and into the 70s for the Tanana Valley.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, first graphic Tuesday morning, IFR up north there, central western Arctic coast, and also a band from the eastern North Slope down across the Brooks Range, Seward Peninsula, on across St. Lawrence Island and the northern Bering, much of the western Bering, just about all the Aleutians IFR, and IFR right up into Bristol Bay, north side of the Alaska Peninsula. IFR Kodiak Island on up into southern Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast. Marginal VFR, Yakutat on down the Panhandle, and some marginal VFR, eastern interior and along the Alaska Range. That vanishes by the afternoon tomorrow, looking at VFR across much of southern Alaska. Some marginal VFR holding their southern Kenai Peninsula, Resurrection Bay, southern Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, with IFR right up almost to Cape St. Elias, and then marginal VFR down the southeast coastline, kind of inland there over the north central area, and then a narrow band of VFR from the North Slope on down to just south of Kivalina. Otherwise, IFR, Bering Sea, and much of the Aleutians. And for Wednesday morning, storminess starting to make landfall on the southwest coast. That's going to push the IFR right up to the coastline and across Bristol Bay, and VFR to start for Kodiak Island, still an area of IFR over the Gulf of Alaska, but Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, Copper River Basin, well, south central Alaska, basically still VFR. Band of IFR remains there from the Seward Peninsula, east-northeast to the eastern Brooks Range. And for Wednesday afternoon, IFR still along and just south of the Brooks Range out to the northwest coast. And marginal for the central and western Arctic coast. Notice the VFR for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And VFR, again, from, the Yukon River right down across the Tanana Valley, most of southern Alaska, still marginal VFR, Gulf of Alaska, southern Prince William Sound, and looks VFR now for the Panhandle. Solid IFR for the Bering Sea, Aleutians, and western Alaska Peninsula. And some of that reaching Nunivak Island and Cape Newenham. And for passes, Anaktuvik starting out IFR, I think it'll improve to marginal at some point in the afternoon, but as for Adigan, probably staying IFR at times the entire day, either approach. Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR tomorrow, and rainy, same forecast, VFR for windy as well, and looking good for Isabel and Mentasta. VFR for Tanita as well. Good day for Portage. Either entrance, VFR, and Chilkoot and White, VFR. Moving on to the freezing levels, quite a thermal gradient up there along the Chukchi Sea and the North Slope Arctic coast, 2,000 feet just south of the western Arctic coast there, and then 12,000 feet in across St. Lawrence Island, and about 10 to 12,000 across central southern Alaska, a little cooler along the North Gulf Coast, Panhandle about 8,000 feet. And with that upper ridging there over the eastern Bering Sea, slowly moving eastward, 12,000 feet, and then falls back to 6,000 with the upper low over the western Aleutians. Icing, got some areas there over the interior Alaska Range into the Tanana Valley, possible icing of the light to isolated moderate variety there up to about 10,000 feet, and then a couple of areas out over the Aleutians, and the one western area, the most formidable, light to isolated moderate, freezing level to 15,000 feet. Jet stream, upper level high, slowly edging its way eastward tomorrow, ridging in across all of southern Alaska. And to the west there, you see southerlies ahead of the western Aleutian low, 40 to 90 knots. That'll be progressing eastward, the whole pattern shifting eastward, and that southerly jet should make landfall on the southwest coast, probably Wednesday morning, and may take until Thursday to get into central Alaska. Otherwise, for 9,000 feet, strong winds, 35 to 40 knots, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and pretty breezy into the central interior, but light winds over southern Alaska. And southwest winds, not too strong there coming into the central Aleutians, light for the Gulf of Alaska, light for the Panhandle. 3,000-foot wind flow chart showing westerlies, west-southwesterlies, 35 to 40 knots, St. Lawrence Island, northern Bering Sea. East-northeast across the Yukon Flats there. Kind of a break and then picking up again along the central Arctic coast with that polar vortex just farther to the north. High pressure over the Alaska Peninsula. Light winds, southern Alaska, Gulf, and the Panhandle. Turbulence with the westerly winds there. We've got areas of considerable moderate turbulence below 5,000 feet in the central interior and St. Lawrence Island.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service with another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining me today are not just one, but two people, both with the last name Stevens, which is even more fun, but no relation. We have Eric Stevens from Dehne and George Stevens, who is a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Awesome. And today you guys brought a really cool toy, or I should say tool, with you. It's a sandbox, but why are you guys working on a sandbox?
Well, it's part of our senior design project, and we were approached by EPSCoR to build this for them. They had a proof of concept that they developed about a year ago, I think, and they wanted a more robust version that they could pack onto a plane and take places, and it's a handy learning tool for kids and adults.
So you're a mechanical engineering student. You've built a traveling sandbox for the experimental program to stimulate competitive research, EPSCoR, and Dehne's facilitated this. But why do we need a traveling sandbox?
Well, the prototype was such a big hit that they decided they wanted another one, actually two, that that would be easier to travel with, possibly marketable even.
Okay, so this is a traveling sandbox that's got a lot of bits and pieces and a computer hooked up to it. What is the computer doing with the sand?
The computer actually uses a Kinect sensor to read the topography of the sand or the shape of the sand, and then the computer translates that into information which it projects using a projector onto the sand, showing topographical lines and which is representative of the shape of the sand.
Okay, so this is a live mapping tool?
Yeah. It's interactive. As you're moving your hands through it, it is actively following and changing the lines to fit what you're doing.
That sounds like something I could have in my backyard.
Yep.
It'd be a lot of fun. So you guys had to change the design a little bit to make this more Alaska-fied, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, how'd you do that?
Well, the original was made out of basically lumber and Simpson strong tie type stuff, and we rebuilt it to make it lighter and basically more transportable. We can pack it down to a fairly small size, and it can be loaded onto a plane and flown anywhere in the state.
Which you guys did today. And you have plans to take this in other places of Alaska, right?
Yep, we're actually going to be headed down to Homer with it later today.
Okay, very good. Eric, how does this fit into science learning around Alaska?
Well, you know what? I think it is a tool and it is a toy. And it brings out a smile from an 8-year-old and the smile from a 48-year-old with that inner 8-year-old wanting to get out. The sandbox, it's an interactive learning tool that teaches us how topography in the 3 dimensions is related to, say, a 2-dimensional map. More about that later. Just like George was saying, it's got a Kinect sensor, not just for video games anymore. It can sense out the lay of the land there, feeds that information in the computer. The computer identifies that, sends a signal to a projector to send topographic lines to map over that lumpy ground. So you get a 3-dimensional topo map out of it. And my favorite thing about it, this is the thing that stops people at the trade show, they stop at your booth and don't leave, is that you run your hand through that sandbox and it responds in real time. It remaps the topography as you get to be Mr. Tectonic Plate Drifter there. You can make things how you want. Well, what if we made a really high mountain here and a low valley there, and the lines adjust to what you did? It's a learning tool because it shows you that connection between these 2-dimensional topo lines and what's really out in Alaska. And Alaska's a place with all kinds of topography. We're from the Great Plains. where topo maps tend to be just like blank pieces of paper, but Alaska is particularly gifted in this regard, and this tool helps us, I think, learn more about our state, really.
Absolutely. And so this is going to enhance STEM learning, the science, technology, engineering, and math, in many different locations around Alaska. Then this would be something that kids and teachers can get their hands on.
Mm-hmm. It sure is. And I mentioned the it's like flypaper at a booth that, or at the Science Potpourri when we had Greg's original version of this sandbox, and that one was made out of scraps of wood, and it was a prototype. But even that one, before it had some of the refinements that George and crew have made for this newer, upscaled, maybe a 2.0 version of the sandbox, even that one was so attractive to people. It just demonstrated that this has potential to be a learning tool, an outreach tool, an education tool that now is portable and can go places in Alaska. Of course, there's only one sandbox, can't be everywhere at once, but hopefully it gets out there, gets the word out about EPSCoR and what science is being done here for Alaskans.
All right, that sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to get my hands in the sand and try this out for myself. We're going to demonstrate this here in our next segment of Alaska Weather Facts, but before we go, we want to remind you that EPSCoR, which is a new acronym for me now, but I'm going to remember this because you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and I invite you to do that. Alaska EPSCoR is also something that facilitates science learning at the University of Alaska around the state, and that stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. So check that out, and make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to have the next version where we actually get our hands in the sand and check out how this works and demonstrates that topography. So for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you again next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis. Again, not much change over the last few days. We've got some of the heavier ice pack in close but not quite reaching Point Barrow there. Otherwise, no big changes are expected for the next 5 days. Coastal water forecast, south coast of the Panhandle, northwest winds 10 to 15 knots on the north coast, northwest to 10, 4 to 5 foot seas, the entire stretch of the coastline there. Lynn Canal, southerlies at 15 knots with seas at 3 feet, and for Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait, and actually all of the central and southern inside water areas, northwest breeze at 10 knots with 2 foot seas. And for Wednesday, Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage, and Glacier Bay as well, looking at southerlies at 10 knots with 2 foot seas, light southeast wind at 10 knots for Stevens Pass, or not Stevens Pass, Clarence Strait, sorry about that. And for the south coast of the Panhandle, north to northeast winds at 15 knots, 5 foot seas, north 15 becoming northwest up there toward Yakutat, down to 10 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas. For Cook Inlet, southwest breeze tomorrow at 10 knots in the afternoon, 2 to 3 foot seas. Kamishak Bay, westerlies at 20 knots. Same forecast for the Barren Islands. And for the North Gulf Coast, winds be kind of variable, light and variable at 10 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas, and variable to north at 10 for Prince William Sound, seas 2 feet. Those will become west for the Sound on Wednesday, still at light though at 10 knots, and for the North Gulf Coast, west-southwest breeze 10 knots with 4 foot seas. Barren Islands west 15 knots, Kamishak Bay southwest at 15. No change for Cook Inlet, southeast breeze at 10 knots with 3 foot seas. Kodiak Island, west-southwest, 15 knots, seas 4 feet, and from Sitkinak to Kessel Cape, northwest at 15. Kessel Cape to Cape Sarachev, northwest at 10, and then the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, variable to south at 10 knots with seas pretty slight at 1 foot, and Bristol Bay, west 15, seas 2 feet. For Wednesday, big increase in the winds there for Bristol Bay, actually from Sitkinak all the way down to Cape Sarachev, southerlies increasing to 30 knots with 8 to 10 foot seas. Bering Sea side of the peninsula, Cape Sarachev right on up in through Bristol Bay, southeast winds 30 knots with 6 foot seas. Kodiak Island, though, outside that increased wind field there, west-southwest 15 knots. Fox Islands tomorrow, southeast 15 knots, seas 3 to 6 feet. Adakanatka, south to southeast at 10 to 15 with 3 to 6 foot seas. And small craft advisories, Amchitka west to Shimia for easterlies in the far western Aleutians at 25 knots, 7 foot seas. Those will fall back to about 20 knots on Wednesday from Shemya to Kiska. And then Amchitka toward Adak, small craft advisories, west 25 knots. Central Aleutian, southwest 20 to 25 knots. And now small craft advisories in for the Fox Islands, west-southwest to southerlies ahead of the front at 25 to 30 knots. For the southwest coast, Kuskokwim Delta coast, southwest 15, Pribilof south 20. Otherwise, small craft advisories everywhere else. St. Matthew Island, Yukon Delta coast, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, all out of the southwest at 25 knots with seas at 5 to 7 feet. Falling back on Wednesday, Norton Sound, southwest 15, St. Lawrence Island, south 15. And Yukon Delta coast, southeast at 20, but now small craft advisories. They're south of Nunivak Island, southeast winds at 30 knots, 7-foot seas, south at 20 for the Pribilofs. Up along the Beaufort Sea, pretty light in the east side there, Kaktovik demarcation point, west at 10, 20 knots on the area from Kaktovik toward Point Barrow at 20, but the central coast there at 25 knots for small craft advisories, back down to 20 knots. And then just 10-knot northerlies from Wales to Cape Thompson. And for Wednesday, small craft advisories for the western and central coast, southwest 25 knots with 5-foot seas, otherwise southwest 15 to 20 knots on either side. For tonight, again, winds really coming down and precipitation diminishing, but take a little longer on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. It'll rain probably the entire night there, and the front weakens, but an area of rain continues for the eastern north slope into the central Brooks Range. Really scatters out those south of the mountains and across the Seward Peninsula. Drying continues over southern Alaska. And for tomorrow, that front stationary and much weaker over the northern interior, sunnier and warmer for southern Alaska as high pressure builds in, especially on Wednesday, probably be the warmest of the week. And the Panhandle, still a chance of showers, and rain reaches the southwest coast in the afternoon.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.